Before Aristophanes mocked politicians, before Plato wrote philosophical dialogues, before comedy became satire, irony, and social criticism, there was a strange figure standing at the edge of Greek civilization in Sicily. A man who mixed philosophy with absurdity, logic with laughter, metaphysics with gluttonous heroes and ridiculous gods. His name was Epicharmus of Kos, and even though most people today barely know his name, ancient writers treated him like one of the founding minds of comedy itself. Plato admired him. Aristotle credited him with helping invent comic plots. Some ancient traditions even claim Plato borrowed ideas from him. But what makes Epicharmus fascinating is not just that he helped create comedy, it's that he used comedy as a weapon against illusion. Long before Socrates wandered Athens asking questions, long before cynics mocked civilization, long before Nietzsche used irony to attack morality, Epicharmus was already turning philosophy into theatrical combat. This is the story of the philosopher-comedian who helped shape Western thought from the shadows. Epicharmus was born around 540 BCE, probably on the island of Kos, though some ancient sources connect him heavily with Sicily and Syracuse. Because philosophy did not begin only in Athens. In fact, during the ancient Greek world, southern Italy and Sicily were exploding with intellectual experimentation. This was the world of Pythagoras, Empedocles, Parmenides, mystery cults, mathematics, cosmology, political upheaval, and radical theories about reality itself. Sicily was a collision point between Greek colonists, tyrants, traders, religious movements, and competing visions of civilization. Unlike Athens, Sicilian culture had a rougher, earthier energy. It was less aristocratic, less polished, more theatrical, more practical, more chaotic. This became the perfect birthplace for comedy. According to Aristotle, Epicharmus and the playwright Formus helped to invent structured comic plots. That sounds really simple, but before this, comic performance was often loose improvisation, festival mockery, vulgar joking, ritual teasing, village performances. Epicharmus transformed comedy into constructed intellectual drama. He gave comedy philosophy. Ancient traditions say Epicharmus studied under Pythagoras or was heavily influenced by the Pythagoreans. That sounds bizarre at first, because when most people think of Pythagoreanism, they think triangles, mathematics, and mystical numbers. But Pythagoreanism was so much more than math. It was a total worldview. The Pythagoreans believed that reality had hidden order, the cosmos operated through harmony, the soul required purification, excess corrupted human beings, and wisdom meant self-mastery. Now imagine combining that worldview with comedy. That was Epicharmus. His plays were funny on the surface, but philosophical underneath. He mocked vanity, greed, stupidity, arrogance, intellectual pretension, and human self-delusion. In other words, Epicharmus used laughter the way Socrates later used questioning, to expose ignorance, and this was one of the most important shifts in intellectual history. Comedy stopped being just mere entertainment. It became epistemological warfare. Almost all of Epicharmus' plays are lost. This is one of the great tragedies of ancient literature. Ancient sources say he wrote somewhere between 35 and 50 plays, but only the fragments survive. And yet those fragments reveal something astonishing. His comedies were not just random jokes. They were philosophical dissections of human behavior. He frequently used mythological parody. Heroes like Heracles and Odysseus became ridiculous figures, gluttons, cowards, buffoons, or fools trapped by appetite. Why? Because Epicharmus was attacking heroic illusion itself. Greek culture glorified legendary heroes. Epicharmus dragged them back down to earth. He showed the body, the appetite, the ego, the stupidity underneath the legend. This was dangerous for the time. Comedy became demythologization, a way of stripping false greatness away from humanity. And that impulse later reappears in Socratic irony, cynicism, Roman satire, Renaissance comedy, Enlightenment skepticism, modern political satire. Epicharmus helped invent the intellectual DNA of it all. One of the strangest and most important ideas connected to Epicharmus concerns identity and change. Some surviving fragments suggest he explored paradoxes of transformation. The basic idea goes something like this. If a person changes continuously, are they still the same person? If matter changes, what remains identical? This sounds incredibly modern, But remember, this is happening around the same intellectual era as Heraclitus, Parmenides, and early metaphysics. Greek philosophy was obsessed with the one question: how can reality change and still remain itself? Heraclitus says everything flows. Parmenides says change is illusion. Epicharmus seemed to approach this problem through comedy, and that's genius, because comedy naturally reveals instability. A comic character constantly collapses into contradiction. The strong become weak, the wise become foolish, the powerful become ridiculous. Comedy exposes the fragility of identity. The joke itself often depends on transformation. This may be why Plato and other philosophers took him seriously. Underneath the humor was metaphysics. Some of Epicharmus' surviving sayings became famous across antiquity. One of the most well-known is "one hand washes the other, give or take." At first, this sounds simple, but it reveals something deep about Greek social philosophy. Human beings are reciprocal creatures. Society functions through exchange, favors, obligations, trust, and cooperation. But there's ambiguity here too, because reciprocity can become corruption. Mutual aid can become mutual exploitation. Epicharmus often plays in that uncomfortable gray area where civilization itself becomes morally unstable. Another surviving line is "judgment, not passion, should prevail." And that sounds Pythagorean almost, but notice something important. Epicharmus doesn't preach this like a solemn prophet. He dramatizes what happens when passion wins. People become absurd. Comedy becomes moral psychology. This is where Epicharmus becomes shockingly modern. Most ancient philosophy sought wisdom through seriousness. Epicharmus realized something else. People defend their illusions hardest when spoken to directly. But laughter bypasses defenses. Comedy humiliates the ego. And once the ego is destabilized, truth can enter. This technique later appears everywhere. Socrates pretending ignorance, Diogenes behaving outrageously, Lucian mocking philosophers, Erasmus writing praise of folly, Voltaire using satire, Nietzsche using irony, even modern stand-up comedy. Good comedy reveals hidden structures of reality, and Epicharmus may have been one of the first thinkers to truly understand this. He understood that absurdity is philosophically revealing. When humans become ridiculous, their hidden motivations are exposed. Comedy becomes X-ray vision for the soul. One fragment attributed to Epicharmus says, "A mortal should think moral thoughts, not immortal thoughts." That line cuts directly against human vanity. Human beings constantly try to escape their limitations through glory or ego, conquest, and fantasies of greatness. Epicharmus kept dragging humanity back to finitude. You are mortal, you are limited, you are bodily, you are foolish. Strangely, this humility becomes liberating, because illusion creates suffering. The more inflated the ego, the more devastating reality becomes. Comedy punctures that inflation, and that's why laughter can feel almost spiritual. For a brief moment, the ego collapses, and we can see ourselves clearly, finally. Ancient writers sometimes accuse Plato of borrowing from Epicharmus. Now, historically, these accusations are debated, but the fact they existed at all is important, because it means Epicharmus was considered philosophically significant enough to stand near Plato. Think about that. Today he's barely remembered, but in antiquity he was treated as a sage, a thinker, a foundational comic mind. Plato himself refers to him respectfully in dialogues like Theaetetus, and there may be actually deeper similarities. Both Plato and Epicharmus use dialogue, expose ignorance, challenge appearances, explore unstable identity. They critique appetite and use dramatic structure philosophically. The difference is tone. Plato is serious irony. Epicharmus is comic irony. But both are trying to wake people up. Epicharmus feels strangely contemporary because modern civilization is saturated with performance. Politics is theater. Social media is theater. Identity itself becomes theatrical. And comedy remains one of the few forces capable of cutting through illusion. That's why satire scares power, because ridicule destabilizes authority faster than argument. Epicharmus understood this over 2,400 years ago. He saw human vanity, performative greatness, intellectual arrogance, false wisdom, and appetite disguised as virtue, and he attacked all of it through laughter. Not because truth is trivial, but because humans are defensive creatures. Sometimes the only way to reveal truth is to make good people laugh first. Epicharmus of Kos stands as one of the strangest crossroads in intellectual history. a philosopher who wrote comedy, a comedian who explored metaphysics, a dramatist who influenced philosophical thinking itself. Most of his works, like all the other pre-Socratics, vanished, but his fingerprints remain everywhere. In satire, in irony, in philosophical humor, in skeptical comedy, in every joke that exposes hypocrisy. He helped invent the idea that laughter can reveal truth, and maybe that's why comedy has always been dangerous, because when human beings laugh at themselves honestly, illusion begins to crack, and once the illusion cracks, philosophy begins.